Welcome to another BlueNet webinar on Office 365 technologies. Today we're taming your inbox with Office 365's Outlook product. These are tips and tricks for efficient email management. BlueNet delivers services across a wide variety of different adoption rates of Office, and today's session is on initial deployment, meaning that anybody can pick this up and use it right away on day one. You don't have to wait for whether or not your colleagues are using these technologies. You don't have to wait for the enterprise to be embracing this. You can start right away. We also deliver solutions across a range of different levels of complexity, and this particular webinar is on what we consider an information worker level solution, meaning you don't need any special skills, you don't need any special training, you just have to have enough curiosity to drill into this product and try to get some better use of it. All right, so what we're going to talk about today to tame your inbox, because I assume you're attending this webinar because you've got too much in the inbox and don't feel like you're on top of it. So for starters, I think you'd have to agree that if you simply had less email, you'd have an easier time of it. So we'll talk about that. Next is the sort of continual battle over, do I create tons of folders and organize things via folders, or do I get better at utilizing search? And I think if you balance your search skills with a reasonable number of folders, you'll probably be happier than going into one extreme or the other. There's a built-in functionality called flagging for follow-up, which I don't see utilized very often, and it's really a sweet way to make sure that things don't fall through the cracks. So we'll talk about that. This is another area where I rarely see anybody change the way various Outlook folders are displaying mail. So sometimes they're taking up too much space and you can hardly see anything. Other times they're too compact and hard to utilize. So we'll talk about how you can adjust each folder view to optimize the things that you place in that folder. Outlook also has a bunch of automation capabilities called quick steps and rules. And so these are ways to sort of automate repetitive processes and take action automatically so that you're not spending so much time trying to do maintenance. There is a feature called folder cleanup, which is not usually terribly well understood exactly what it does and why. You click the button and Outlook just asks you, do you want to do this? And it doesn't really explain what's going to happen. So I've got a scenario set up here where you're going to see a pretty dramatic reduction in the number of email messages that we're going to be confronted with. And then finally, this product is epically configurable. Almost everything Outlook does has a default setting that you can change. So if you don't like how Outlook is working in various areas, it's time to take a peek and see what you can maybe tweak on that as well. All right, so before jumping into this, we've got to talk about what product I'm actually talking about. And Microsoft labels pretty much everything in their product line has the word Office in it. And so just saying that you have Office Outlook doesn't really mean anything because there's so many versions and variations. So the first thing here is we're talking about the desktop version of Outlook, not the web version of Outlook. The web version of Outlook is terrific if you are on the go and need to get email in a browser, but it is not really the place to try to get a handle on an inbox disaster. If you have an inbox disaster, the web edition is not the place to try to go and fix that. And then don't forget the mobile app. The mobile app is awesome for when you're literally on the go, you're on the road, and the mobile app is really difficult to use when you've got 4,000 unread inbox messages or, you know, 1 million deleted records, and you've got to somehow search on your phone to find the right record. So again, this whole discussion is about the current version of Outlook. Some of the things we talk about do exist in prior versions, but mostly I'm talking about the current version. So there's a backstage feature when you click the file a ribbon menu setting, this thing called the backstage comes up and tells you exactly which version you're using. So I'm using the Microsoft Office 365 Pro Plus. So if your version of Outlook doesn't match what I'm seeing on the screen here, then it's probably because you're not using the most current version. So anyway, you're going to have more productivity if you simply don't have so many email messages. So just because Outlook does allow you to have long email chains going back and forth with groups of people, yes, it supports it, but don't do it. You should be doing this in Teams for group and individual messaging. You can collaborate as you communicate without creating a giant mess of an email chain. So this is for internal operations. You really ought to be using Teams. Tell people to stop, especially group messages. Email messages that have multiple people in the to line and half a dozen people being CC'd, try to keep them in the loop. Nobody needs that in their inbox. That's exactly what Teams is designed to do. You can also forward email into a Teams channel. So this often happens when you receive an email from the outside world and you go, wow, there's a bunch of my colleagues that need to know about this. So you forward it to a bunch of colleagues who immediately start replying back to that forward, adding value to the conversation, and pretty soon you've got, again, another inbox mess. So you can forward email messages into a Teams channel and then go collaborate with people, because now you have a permanent record of all the back and forth and people can more easily find it. And then you should be sending links to files and not the files themselves. So rather than using your email transport as a file storage mechanism, my personal goal when I'm consulting with an organization on utilizing Office 365 as good as it can be, is I say I want to see 0 attachments for internal emails. So store the file in Teams, store it in SharePoint, store it in OneDrive, store it wherever it makes best sense, and then send links to these files rather than the files themselves. And this was covered extensively in a solution briefing a couple of months ago. So if you go to our website at bluenetinc.com, go to the solution briefing events, there are some historical links there. We cover this topic in great detail over several prior. All right, and lastly, if you're getting a lot of junk mail, don't just tolerate it. Talk to your administrators, find out who does administration for your spam filter, and ask them, to take a look and dial it up, maybe because you perhaps are just getting a lot of junk that you really don't need to be getting. All right, so as I mentioned in the preamble to this, there's always this issue about, do I create lots of folders or do I master search? And I think the correct way is to do it both. Nested folder structures are supported, and yes, you can go overboard. Just ask anybody with a file share where the folders are nested 11 or 12 levels deep. Nobody likes that. You don't like it. It's not a good way to organize things. So once you've set up some folders, however, it's really easy to move email messages from your inbox or elsewhere. You simply pick it up and drag it and drop it in the folder, and away you go. You can also drop it to your file system. So if a particular email message is very important to you because it maybe contains a contract language, or it's the final version of some language, or it has the final version of an attachment or something, you can click on that email, drag it out to a file folder out in your file system, and Outlook will make a copy of it. And that way you can keep that email message chain perhaps with a quote document and a budget estimate and some signed quotes or orders or something, and that email message can actually be stored along with the other documents that it matches. So that eliminates the need for you to track down the right email a year later when somebody says, hey, where did that language come from? You can say, hey, right here, this is the email that kicked everything off. All right. Once you've organized things via folders and you're confident you like the structure, the next step is to take advantage of some automations. And so later on in this presentation, I'm going to show you how to use quick steps and rules to help enforce some of the decisions that you'd like to make. don't mess with quick steps and rules before you're happy with your folder structure. Because if you start making changes to your folder structure, you're going to break your quick steps, you're going to break your rules, and you're going to have to go back and recreate them. So kind of take baby steps with this process. All right, so I mentioned that too many folders, especially too many nested folders, is not a panacea. So you should also simultaneously be mastering the search box and the ribbon that's associated with the search box. This is particularly important for being rapidly searching through large numbers of items. Because I personally don't like lots of folders. It's not my style. And the way I can get rid of that, or sorry, the way I can overcome that is by just being really, really good at search. So that's something I think would make sense to demonstrate here. So I'm going to go and pop up my copy of Outlook here. And you see I've only got a single message in the inbox. I hope you're jealous. And notice that I have no unread items elsewhere either. So I think I'm pretty much on top of this thing. So I'm going to go to my deleted items folder here because I want to find a particular email where I was talking with an external subcontractor here about a thing with the app data folder. And I noticed that if I scroll through here, I've got an awful lot of hits, and so this is sort of ridiculous. I'm not going to go and look at every single one of these things. And I noticed that some of them are coming from an unrelated project that I'm not interested here that I was doing with Kaizen. So I'm going to go and use the not symbol to say, I want to see app data keyword, but not if Kaizen also shows up as a keyword, and that reduces the number of hits. And so I can put as many combinations of keywords and as many combinations of dash nots until I dial it in. The problem is that often when you get overly specific with keywords, you start getting so few hits and you go, I'm not confident that, I'm not seeing what I'm expecting to see. And so that's where you really need to master some of the other refiners. So notice that when my cursor is in this search box, I get a new ribbon called the search ribbon is suddenly at my disposal. And I may remember, the file that the message I'm looking for had an attachment. So I'll say has attachments, and you'll see that we zero in on one with an attachment. And so you can experiment with this to get better and better at doing this. You also notice that we've got this from refiner, so I can say I'm looking for app data, and I happen to know that it was from a particular person. So maybe I want to put a refiner in here that says it's from Brady, and now all I'm seeing are messages from Brady that have this app data reference somewhere in there. So as you see, we've got all sorts of additional qualifiers here, and it's just something to experiment with. And it's particularly effective when you experiment to do it for messages that you know for sure exist. Don't try experimenting to see if you can find a message that you're not positive exists, because if you don't get hits, you might go, I guess it doesn't exist. So you want to make sure that you know what you're expecting to see, and that way you're using these search refiners correctly when you do that. All right, I mentioned flagging for follow-up, very, very important, and it's sort of integrates a to-do process right into Outlook that doesn't require you to do any other action. You don't create a separate list. You don't enter something in a tracking spreadsheet or a tracking file or something like that. You just flag it for follow-up, and then you can set a search filter to show you things that need follow-ups. It's really, really slick. I use it all of the time. So let me give you an example of this. Go back to my inbox here. I'm going to go to my sent items, and if I scroll through here, every once in a while, you'll see here's one. Here's a flag for follow-up, and who wants to roll and scroll, right? So you just put your click up into the search refinement box and see, I want to see everything that's flagged, and instantly I've got all of the different emails that are here necessarily for a follow-up. And if I go and say, oh, yeah, okay, I've talked to Colin here, let me, I'll just clear the flag, I stop having to worry about that. And if there was something I sent earlier today that I think might need follow-up, I'll go and click the follow-up flag here, and in the future when I go search for follow-ups, there's that item that was just flagged now. So it's really, really a slick way to accomplish this. The other thing that you can do is go to your navigation shortcuts pane, and if you click on this task button, you get the same behavior basically, and it allows you a little bit more flexibility in doing additional searches and whatnot from here. But I normally just do it as a quick search operation and leave it at that. All right, view settings. The default settings are not bad. All right, Microsoft put some research effort into these things and decided that these are reasonable defaults for the way things are laid out. But you can go and experiment with that. These can be changed on a folder by folder basis. So maybe I want my inbox configured a certain way, but when I go to my deleted items folder, I don't want to have it laid out exactly the same way. I want to see a different combination of data there. And perhaps if I go to a custom folder I built, I maybe want to see things arranged a little bit differently. The main thing is the amount of white space and details that are present. You dial it up, you dial it down, and that way you can make a screen more dense with the data that you really need to see. The problem is this is not a really well thought out part of the product. You're going to see a very jarring transition in the user interface when we go into here. We have the lovely ribbon bars with the colorful icons and a lot of help hovering and stuff. And when we go into the view configuration, it's like a 20-year-old interface, old school. So locate the reset view button and be ready to click it, because you're going to mess it up. Everybody messes up view settings when they first start messing with it, and you're going to accidentally create some chaos, and you won't know how to undo that problem. So let's give it a whirl here. And you might have noticed that my light battery just went out. It got a little dark. It's not you. It's me. All right. So here is I have a special nested folder here called receipts, and whenever I get a receipt from any vendor, I just drop them into this folder. And the problem is that this is not a terribly efficient way to organize this, because when I need to see a receipt, it's not usually done by date. The default view for everything is by date. My sent items are arranged, by date. My deleted items are arranged by date. That makes sense. But here, I really don't want to organize it that way. I would like to have these organized by the entity that sent me, right? To see who's the sender, who's this from. That would be maybe a better way to organize this particular view. So I'm going to go to the view ribbon, change view, manage views, and suddenly we have this ugly little dialogue that's super confusing. So compared to the rest of this product, I say. So I'm going to hit create it and say I want to create a new one. I'm going to call it by sender. And I want to apply, and this is very important, I want to apply it just to this folder. And whether you make it visible to everyone or just you, that part doesn't really matter. But it's just, don't ever leave it for all, because what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to add this to every single folder in my entire structure. Maybe that's what you want to do. I'm just saying you got to think hard about this thing. So let me just kind of narrow this down and just say just this folder. All right, so one thing you can do is you can change which columns are included. And so maybe I don't need importance, I don't need a reminder, I don't need a flag status. None of this stuff is really relevant to what I'm doing. Or I could find other fields like sensitivity or other information. You can add and remove the columns that are being shown in this particular dialog. But my particular thing is not which columns are displayed. My goal here is to organize how this thing is grouped. So I'm going to go to the group by here and say that I want to go on the from line and say that that's how I want to organize this thing. So again, I have a new one called by sender. It's only applied to this folder. And when I leave here and come back, it's not doing it. That's because I'm still in what's called the compact view. But notice I have a new one called by sender. And so now I have all of my receipts are organized by who sent it to me. So this is just a quick example of how you can go around, making some pretty dramatic changes to what's going on. If I go to my sent items, you'll see I have the same set here, and I can do a compact version of this. I can do a single line version. It changes things, and this is the sort of thing that's really easy to mess up, and that's why I stress that you got to find the reset button, so that if I really messed up this receipts, I could go into here and just say, hey, let's undo this the damage that I did to this thing. All right, quick steps and rules. When you always do the same thing every time you see an email, you can automate that process. The best way to get started, and I recommend this, highly recommend this, is start with quick steps. Quick steps have a limited range of options, but the dialogues are not terribly confusing. And they also are only initiated by you. So nothing's going to happen automatically. It's going to happen because you kicked it off. And so that way you're not going to suddenly have messages disappearing from your inbox and going who knows where because your rule was set up incorrectly. Then once you've sort of mastered quick steps, then you can go and start creating rules. And rules have an insane amount of customality. That's a new word I just made up there. Customizable functionality. Customality. Yeah, I like that. All right, so a rule can also be launched magically, manually, but they also be triggered automatically. And by automatically, I mean when a email message shows up in a particular folder, usually your inbox, the rule can simply happen immediately. And you don't have to be around. And in fact, you don't even have to be running Outlook. Some of these rules will actually run up on the server. So even if you're signed out of Outlook, you're completely signed out, you're not running Outlook anywhere, these rules can still function. And this is particularly important on rules that involve forwarding to other people or groups or teams or something. Maybe you're on vacation for a week and you're going to be signed out of all of your devices. It'd be nice to know that, hey, these rules are simply running even in your absence. Now, the problem is that some rules can only be conducted on your workstation. So whether or not they can run on the server or the workstation depends on the nature of the rule. And I don't really want to get into a whole lot of details here because this is more technical than I really want to get into. But briefly, if the rule involves Outlook behaviors, then Outlook has to be running, right? It's like setting a follow-up flag or something. That's an Outlook thing that the server doesn't know about. But things like forwarding rules and routing rules and stuff, those can all run on the server. So let's go and give that a whirl here. I'm going to bring up my inbox, and I have created a folder here called low priority. And notice there's nothing in it right now. And so I know that certain emails that come in, I know that they're low priority. I don't really need them. It's not something I need to deal with right now. So I want to get it out of my inbox and deal with it later. So I'm going to create a new quick step to accomplish that. So I'll call it the low priority quick step. And my action will be to move to a folder. And you see there's only a limited number of actions. And move to folder is a very common one. So that's the first one in the choice. Choose the folder. I'm going to say send it to my low priority. And if you just stopped here, that's fine. This would be an interesting rule, but I'm going to add another action here, and my action is going to be mark it as unread, because notice this is considered a read email. And if I just move it to low priority, I'm going to forget about it, right? Moving it to low priority means I'll never notice it's there, right? So here I'll go and finish this rule. And now when I click here on low priority, two things are going to happen. It's moved into the low priority folder and marked as unread. So I can go into here and decide, okay, I read that. That's good. I'm done. I can go back and get on with it. I'll give you a little taste of what rules are capable of doing and by managing rules and alerts. And you'll see that the process of setting these up is substantially more complicated. It has a lot more options, but also with some complexity. And so here I can decide the conditions under which this rule should be run, right? And so I can say things like, you know, if there are specific words in the message body, if it's specific people sent it to me, if it has attachments or whatever. And this is one of my favorite that drives some of my coworkers here at BlueNet nuts, but I have rules that say if I'm not in the to box and I'm only being CC'd, that's a low priority thing for me. If somebody's just covering their butt by CCing me on something and I'm not part of the two, I'm not addressed directly, I want that off to the side where I can deal with it later. So that's the trigger actions. And then what should happen, maybe I'll say, okay, I want to send this to that low priority folder. Then we can take additional actions here. Maybe, you know, flag the message for follow-up, and so on and so on and so on. So there's just this endless list of configuration changes here. I can put exceptions. Maybe I'm CC'd, but if it's marked as important, then maybe I don't want to do this. So it just goes on and on and on and on, etc. So that's the rules. Walk before you run with the quick steps, and you'll get there. All right, let's talk folder cleanup. Folder cleanup is for dealing with long threaded chains. They are a total pain to deal with, because if somebody has been replying to your replies, to your replies, to your replies, say over the course of a week, what sometimes happens is other people get CC'd or toed into the main line, and they reply, and you've got this long giant chain that ends up being completely out of order. So Microsoft has a one-button click solution to that problem. So before we get into this, there should be teams handling this. So you shouldn't need to clean up folders like this if you're using Teams. However, sometimes people in your organization just won't use it, and it also doesn't help if this is an external non-employee person that you're dealing with. So in my particular demo, I have this ongoing thing with the thing we call the sync tool, and I'm using a subcontractor to help me on this. And so I don't have a choice of using Teams. He's just out there in the world, and we're dealing with it. So I already mentioned this, that if you're getting trouble with long chains, maybe a rule that, you know, hey, move this to the when I can get to it folder when these things are in a problem. But here, let's do the cleanup and deal with it here. So I'm going to go back to my inbox and go over to the sync tool, and we'll see that I have a total of 23 messages down here, and there's a 23, and we see that it's going back and forth since June. We've been going and talking about this. I kicked it off with a where are we on this, and like so often happens, you know, chaos ensues, and I don't really have a good way to organize this. So this is a perfect opportunity to use the cleanup folder button. And so it says, you know, do you want me to clean up the folder? And it's kind of mysterious. What's a redundant message? All right, well, a redundant message is one where the full contents of the email are also present in other messages. That's the thing with these long chains. They have many copies of the stuff. So when I click this button, I end up with 6 email messages instead of 23. And now each of these has a different part of the chain, and I can more easily now go through all these steps to figure out I'm sorry, I can go through the much smaller set of emails more confidently. If I look at those 6 messages, I'm going to be pretty much up to date on what's going on instead of seeing 23 messages that are mostly redundant and useless information. All right, and lastly, the options dialog. I mentioned this is something that you should take a look at. One of the first things that people go is, oh, there's so many options. Yeah, that's the nature of the beast. So what I recommend doing is make one change at a time. Don't roll and scroll through this giant dialogue going, 6 of these, half a dozen of those, put them all in the shopping cart, hit OK. You go back to your inbox, and it's total chaos. Or worse, you won't notice it's chaos because the feature you flicked only happens under certain conditions, and you didn't hit those conditions yet. All right, so that's why I don't recommend that you make a ton of changes. Make one single change and then explicitly test for it. And if you like it, leave it. And if you don't like it, revert it back to the way it was before. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to go to the File tab, which is we call the Backstage. And we have the Options tab. And we'll see that this Options thing just doesn't end. Each of these has a long list of options, and you can scroll through and scroll through and scroll through, and most of these have, lots and lots and lots of different things. So I can go in and just read through these. Maybe, you got 10 or 15 minutes before a meeting and you got nothing else going on. Just, okay, I'm going to investigate the mail section here and see what's there. And then some of these are so complicated that they're more than just a checkbox. There's also a dialogue that opens up even more. All right, so here we have a nested series of choices that are all related to editing email messages. Oh my gosh, and so it just never ends. But it is really fascinating to go through here and notice the level of changes that you can make. So it's kind of fun to fine-tune your copy of Outlook to work exactly the way you want Outlook to work. All right, so thanks for attending, and if I piqued your interest on a particular topic and maybe everybody in your organization needs to know about this, or maybe you're a subset of your org, maybe your team of 20 colleagues or something on a project need to handle their email better, just contact me. My email message is there at the bottom of the slide. Drop me a line. We're happy to take these webinars on the road. We're happy to do custom sessions with our customers, and, to make sure you're getting the best use possible out of your investment in Office technologies. So thanks again, and see you next time.